background, as you're finding it, goes something like this. It's in the early stages of our Lord's development and ministry as he is here. And he's at the temple in Jerusalem with his half-brothers. You do know that Jesus has half-brothers. There's 4 of them given by name. Mary and Joseph had 4 additional children after Jesus, and some sisters were not given their names. So in these early days of Jesus, his half-brothers are with him, and the 12 disciples are with him as well. And they're all in the early stages of thinking, coming to terms with who they think Jesus is. Even with his brothers, they did not believe that he was the Messiah, the Son of God. They had their doubts. And even the disciples in those early days were struggling with it. In chapter 7, well, we won't read, but they are attending one of many of the Jewish annual feasts, and Jesus is causing quite a commotion. The common people are really mystified at him. Some liked him, some were intrigued, and others were not quite sure. Let her be. For sure, Jesus was creating quite a stir among the Jewish religious leaders. The scribes were part of a larger group called the Pharisees, but the scribes and the Pharisees together were what we might call Jewish lawyers, and they were out to trip Jesus in any inconsistencies or infractions of the Old Testament law of Moses. They were also known as the rigid enforcers of all things Moses. And Jesus had dared to heal a paralytic man on the Sabbath. This is a good place for us to add our own, the sound effects of motorcycles coming up. We got to drown them out. Jesus dared to heal a person on the Sabbath. And it upset the religious cart big time. There were the priests who led Sabbath worship on Saturday. And then there was the Sanhedrin, a group of 70 men who acted as the Supreme Court in Jewish religious matters. All of them came together with this belief that Jesus was dangerous. Let her see. The people were loving him. There's a place here in chapter 6 and chapter 7 leading up to what we're going to read now that I would challenge you to read sometime today or sometime this week to get some of the back and forth struggles that all were around the Lord Jesus Christ. It's a good place to explore. But in chapter 7, verse 53, after a good verbal exchange between Jesus, the people, and the religious Jewish leaders, they all go home. Verse 53 says, and everyone went to his own house. But Jesus, chapter 8, verse 1, but Jesus went up to the Mount of Olives. Now early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came to him, and he sat down and he taught them. Then the scribes and the Pharisees brought to him a woman who had been caught in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they said to him, Teacher, this woman was caught in adultery in the very act. Now, Moses, in the law, commanded us that such should be stoned. Say the next 5 words with me. But what do you say? Now, how would they have said that? But what do you say? This they said, testing him, thankful that John put this in for us, that they might have something of which to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote on the ground with his finger, as though he did not hear. Pause. Have you ever wondered if there was a positive sneakiness to Jesus. Nix nooksy, a bit of a, I forgot the term I was just going to use, a bit of a sense of humor, as he knows what these guys are up, and he uses pause magnificently. He writes on the ground with his finger as though he did not hear. So, when they continued asking him, he raised himself up and he said to them, "He who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first." And again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. Then those who heard it, being convicted by their conscience, went out one by one, beginning with the oldest, even to the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. But when Jesus had raised himself up and saw no one but the woman, he said to her, "Woman, where are those accusers of yours? Has no one condemned you?" And she said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus says to her, a statement that on its surface catches us by alarm and surprise. And we wonder what Jesus is up to when he says, "Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more." Like so many times when people don't understand Jesus, people can get upset or they can jump to conclusions that aren't true. Weren't true then, aren't true today. First of all, Jesus was either a strange teacher, as these Jewish leaders were making the accusations of, and he upset them and they were angry for what Jesus was doing to their teachings of the Old Testament law of Moses. Secondly, or Jesus was a hopeful Messiah, making the Jewish population wonder, will he come and overthrow this Roman oppression that we're living under? And it was up to the religious group to put Jesus in his place. And so in this incident, with a surprise ending for the sinful, adulterous woman, it really messed with the religious leader's mind. But even more than this, it caused some problems for believers today. In fact, before you have studied this passage of Scripture, I believe that you understand where this is going. But the first time you ever came across this passage of Scripture, I would no doubt believe you've had some difficulty with what seems to be the leniency of Jesus in his tone or his response to this obviously wrong actioned lady. Some Christians believe today, number 3, that Jesus was soft on sin. Or Jesus should have addressed this woman, or Jesus missed something here. But none of those things can be true because Jesus was what? He was perfect. He was righteous. He was holy. So maybe number 4, we've missed something. And this morning is a good time to be reminded of what we may have missed. Let's look more closely. First of all, there's the issue of the law. In Leviticus chapter 20, verse 10, God told Moses point blank, the man who commits adultery with another man's wife, the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. Who should be put to death? Both. God, in his infinite wisdom, was forming, you remember what was happening back in the Old Testament days, forming his chosen people, Abraham's children's children, out of whom God would bring his Messiah, Jesus, the answer to the penalty of sin for all of mankind. In the bigger picture, bless you, God was actually practicing, now this is my term, practicing with the nation of Israel. And God was saying to them, in so many words, here are the rules, Obey them and I will bless you. Ignore them and you will be punished. So first of all, there was the law. Second of all, there was Jesus. By the time of Jesus in Israel, when he's there in the first century, the religious rules had become a mixture of good intentions, lots of deeper explanations, with some, how can we get around this stuff, tossed in for good measure. As noted, Jesus had healed on the Sabbath. Horrors. The people cheered, but the religious leaders thought it was the worst thing. They fumed. In fact, there's one of those illustrations I remember from somewhere reading years ago, that the religious leaders knew that there was I have to stick to my notes, they were supposed to be caring for their aged parents, kind of like what we're supposed to do today for our aged parents. Somebody say that's true. How many of you are getting aged? How many of you love it when your younger kids come along and help and take care of you, even though you're resisting the aging process? I digress, I'm sorry. But in the Jewish tradition, you were supposed to take care of your parents. But there was a way that the scribes and the Pharisees and the leaders of the Jewish law had worked a way around that where you wouldn't actually have to pay for your parents' care. And how that was if you dedicated all of your money to God, your bankrolls, your CDs, all the possessions that you had, if you said publicly that all my possessions now belong to God, therefore I can't afford to take care of my aged parents. That was in the books. Thirdly, there was this trap. The religious leaders, including the scribes and Pharisees, brought what they thought would be a perfect trap for our Lord. The words are tough to read. She's an adulterous woman. There was a public trial. The full force of the law of Moses was on their side, and Moses, as the Pharisees quoted correctly, Moses commanded us that such a woman like this should be stoned. But what do you say? Thankfully, John tells us of their motivation. John tells us before the rest of the story unfolds that they were testing Jesus, that they might have something of which to accuse him. It was a trap. Fifthly, there's this overlooked truth. You've heard it, you've known it. The law of Moses did not condemn only the adulteress, but both the adulterer, that's the male, and the adulteress, that's the female. Both of them were to be stoned. And the scribes and the Pharisees, can I use the word conveniently, overlooked this piece of information? Do you think they really overlooked it? Do you think they had forgotten that the male was just as guilty as the female, or were they so set on their purpose? A trap that they set up a flawed situation? Fifthly, there was the Jesus response. The very response that has made some honest Christians cringe. Quickly, Jesus did not call out the unforgiven man. He didn't bring up the point. Pharisees and scribes, you've got the story wrong here. You forgot to bring the guy into this. I'm not answering. He doesn't say anything like that. He doesn't argue with them. Neither did he fall for their trap. He did, however, make them think. Once he got their attention by using that pause where he stoops down and writes in the sand. And they continue with the argument. Well, what are you going to say? He stands up and he says, the line, he who is without sin among you, let him throw the first stone. Do you know hidden sin is never hidden from God? You also know that hidden sin is never hidden from the hider, from the one who is guilty of sin. How many of us would remember times in our lives when we knew we were the guilty one, and we tried to hide it from parents or the authorities or school, teachers, principals, police, and they go on, and yet we know. Quickly this morning, let's answer the condemnation question. How could Jesus say to that woman, neither do I condemn you, go and sin no more? Isn't it just a tad too lenient, Jesus? Did you miss something here, Lord? Isn't it like, isn't this response kind of like the made-up scenario I thought of yesterday as I was putting these notes back together? There's a knock on your door at night, and there's a state trooper with your child standing there in cuffs. You see the picture? Any of you have a child like that? And the policeman says, Mr. and Mrs. Parent, your child was driving your car in the mall parking lot trying to run over everybody he could find. And a lenient parent would say something like this, well, that's okay, honey, just don't go and do it again. Something about Jesus' response to this woman smacks of that. Neither do I condemn you, just don't go and do it again. But what does Jesus answer? How does Jesus answer the condemnation question? Neither do I condemn you, don't or go and sin no more. Condemnation in the Mosaic law meant certain death. If you were condemned by the law of Moses for an act such as this, you were not going to receive a scolding. You were not going to receive a second chance. You were not going to receive from the authorities of the Old Testament scribes and Pharisees and religious leaders, well, you shouldn't have done this. There was no, I'm so disappointed in you, go to your room. It meant condemnation, meant death now, period. We don't understand that kind of justice. In our American way of doing things, you're innocent until what? Proven guilty, and then you have a long drawn-out trial, and you can say, I didn't do it, even though you know you did do it, until the proof of burden are upon those whose job it is to prosecute. It was not the way it was in the Moses law. It actually would not surprise me. Now, I don't know if this is true, but listen to the analogy. It wouldn't surprise me if these scribes and these Pharisees would have had pockets sewn in around the bottoms of their longer robes, just so rocks could be stored there. Because you never know when a situation like this would happen. You never know when it will be called upon to execute justice. Now, and here was the classic situation. That was the condemnation of the law of Moses. What is the condemnation of the ministry of Jesus? We all know John 3:16, don't we? For God, say it with me. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Do you remember what John 3:17 said? For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him. What these two verses together remind us, as I'm wrapping this message up, is that condemnation is coming. Condemnation is the righteous wrath of God coming someday on all evil, all sinfulness, all unrighteousness. Condemnation is hell, the lake of fire, the eternal separation that comes at Judgment Day. So yes, condemnation is coming. But today is the day of what? Salvation. In the Old Testament, God told Isaiah to say this: seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man forsake his thoughts. Let him return to the Lord, and he will have mercy on him. Somewhere in the Scriptures, we hear the term, he will abundantly pardon. But there is coming a day. The next time Jesus comes will be the Judgment Day. It will be the condemnation day. But until then, there is always hope. Even for what we might think is the worst case scenario that we might have to face in our own lives. Let me ask you a question. Is there room for a second chance for this woman? Jesus, in so many words, is saying, neither is your life going to be taken today. Neither do I condemn you. He has no stones in the hem of his garment. By the way, if they actually carried stones in the hem of the garment, I've never read that anywhere. We should have read it somewhere. If they carried stones, do you know who always bore the weight of those stones every day? Can you imagine living underneath the weight of condemnation ready to be meted out on people who deserve it at any minute while you're in the grocery store? There might be called a meeting outside in the parking lot. I'm glad I got my stone. Cannot imagine the weight of condemnation upon those who thought they were the executioners. There is coming a day of judgment. The wrath of God will be poured out on all sinfulness, but today is the day of circumstances. Closing thoughts. When we are harsh on others' open sinfulness and waywardness and rebellion and their bad attitudes, then we reach for our blocks. And we instead learn to respond like Jesus. I wonder how much lighter our step would be if we emptied the pockets of our stones. I have no idea that Ryan's selection of this last song, Jesus, Friend of Sinners, would fit the message of this passage. You've read this passage multiple times. But I wonder, would we be able to say to people that we love and we're trying to win them to the Lord, with our tone, with our looks, could we say to them, there will be no stoning today? Without saying that what you've done is okay. There is no K-N-O-W. Know this. that there is a judgment day coming. But today is the day of, say it with me, salvation. There'll be no killing today. Let me extend mercy and praise so that they can choose right. As you go home in a second, a couple more seconds, I invite you to tell the Lord your worst case situation. Where if you could really have your way, you'd reach for a rock and let them have it. They've hurt you, they've insulted you, they've never come back and asked for apologies, they've done stuff, the list is long, and you're as if you're walking around with the stones all around you because you are overburdened with wanting to get even on those who hurt you so. What if, between now and when you get to the car, you got rid of this house? Heavenly Father, I think I have a better understanding of why Jesus responded this way. He was not being lenient on the woman. He never said what you did was okay. But neither was he going to issue the call to the stones to be hurled. Lord, help us to be more like Christ in those settings around us. We know that in this day of grace, in this day of forgiveness, in this day where your Spirit is working in the lives of people, there is coming a day when that day of grace will be over. Help us, Lord, to be gracious people so that people might see the graciousness of Jesus in us. It doesn't negate the fact that we carry hurts upon our memories and our psyche and our hearts, and it's hard, and we'd rather throw something, a fist or a rock or an insult. But remember, Lord, help us to remember. Today is the day of salvation. May we learn to forgive those who we might have thought don't deserve our forgiveness or yours. Thank you for including this tough story in your book for us to see once again. Help us to live it out. In the strong name of Jesus, we pray. And all lighter people said, Amen?
Amen.
God bless you. Would you stand? I don't have a closing song for you. I don't have many rock songs. Well, I did. But we can't sing those in church. Shake hands with someone, would you?